It started like a normal television moment, calm on the surface, but something underneath was already cracking. No one watching expected what was about to unfold, and no one in that studio was prepared for the collision that followed. Before we dive into the video, please like, subscribe, and comment. Now, let's get back to the video. What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected and beloved actors finally reaches a breaking point on live television? What happens when years of frustration, silence, and restraint suddenly boil over in the most public place possible? That was the question hanging in the air the moment Danny Devito took his seat on The View, and the tension only grew with every passing second. This was supposed to be a routine appearance, nothing more than a promotional stop on a busy schedule. Danny Devito arrived expecting light conversation, familiar jokes, and harmless questions about his long career and latest project. He sat comfortably at the panel, coffee mug in hand, relaxed, confident, and unaware that the conversation was about to veer into dangerous territory. Joy Behar, as usual, took control of the discussion with her trademark smirk and casual authority. She leaned in and framed the topic like a harmless generational debate, asking Danny what he thought about young actors today and their constant complaints. She suggested that in the old days, people worked harder, complained less, and didn't make such a spectacle out of their struggles. Danny shifted slightly in his chair, his expression tightening just enough for anyone paying close attention to notice. He responded calmly, explaining that every generation faces different pressures, and that today's actors are dealing with non-stop scrutiny, online criticism, and mental health challenges that weren't openly discussed when he started out. That should have been the moment to move on, but instead, Joy waved him off dismissively. She scoffed at the idea of mental health pressure, mocking the concepts of anxiety and emotional struggle, and framing them as excuses rather than realities. According to her, young actors today were simply soft, unwilling to handle adversity the way previous generations supposedly did. The mood in the studio shifted instantly. The other hosts exchanged uneasy glances as Danny's jaw tightened and his grip on the coffee mug grew firmer. He remained composed, but the warmth in his expression faded. He pushed back, stating clearly that anxiety and depression were not signs of weakness, and that dismissing them was dangerous. Joy leaned forward, her tone dripping with condescension. She doubled down, insisting that real toughness meant ignoring feelings, pushing through pain, and not making personal struggles public. She framed wealth and success as shields against emotional suffering, suggesting that anyone making millions had no right to struggle. Danny's voice sharpened, and for the first time, the edge was unmistakable. He explained that success does not erase human emotions, and that some of the most accomplished people he knew had fought intense battles with depression and anxiety. His words were controlled, but the frustration beneath them was unmistakable. Joy fired back immediately, dismissing the idea again and reframing the issue as a lack of personal responsibility. She accused modern actors of playing victims and avoiding accountability, arguing that people should simply deal with their problems instead of making them public. The studio fell unusually quiet. Danny's knuckles turned white as he set his mug down slowly, deliberately, as if grounding himself before saying what came next. He repeated her words back to her, questioning whether she truly believed that personal responsibility explained mental health crises. Then came the moment that changed everything. Danny asked, calmly but firmly, whether she believed that young actors who took their own lives simply failed at personal responsibility. The words landed hard, and the air in the studio felt heavy and suffocating. Joy didn't hesitate. She responded coldly, suggesting that if someone couldn't handle fame and pressure, they should have chosen a different career. The statement hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and even the other hosts looked visibly uncomfortable. Danny's face flushed, his breathing deepened and his composure began to crack. He asked her directly whether she truly believed mental health was just a choice, whether depression was simply weakness, and whether those words were really something she wanted to stand behind on live television. Joy, seemingly unaware of the firestorm she had ignited, doubled down yet again. She insisted that mindset and attitude were the key factors, claiming that choosing positivity and gratitude was all it took to be happier. According to her, it really was that simple. That was the moment Danny stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor, sending a jolt through the studio. The sudden movement startled everyone, and all eyes snapped toward him as he repeated her words back to her in disbelief. He challenged her directly, calling out how ignorant and harmful her statements were. He accused her of dismissing an entire generation's legitimate struggles and spreading misinformation about mental health on a massive platform. Behind the cameras, producers were already panicking, gesturing frantically for someone to intervene, but it was too late. The fuse had been lit, and Danny was no longer willing to sit quietly while harmful narratives went unchallenged. He spoke with decades of experience behind him, explaining that he had watched talented people destroy themselves because they believed their pain wasn't real, because they were told to toughen up, because they were shamed into silence. Joy tried to interject, suggesting he was overreacting, but Danny shut it down immediately. He pointed out that telling millions of viewers that mental health is an attitude problem was not a harmless opinion, it was dangerous. The audience sat frozen, completely silent, as raw emotion poured out of an actor known more for humor than confrontation. This was no longer a casual talk show moment. It had become something far more serious, and there was no turning back. Joy tried to regain control of the moment, adjusting her posture and softening her tone, but the damage was already done. She insisted she never said mental health was not real, only that people today were too quick to use it as an excuse, and the audience could feel how thin that defense sounded. Danny didn't sit back down. He stood his ground, eyes locked on her, and fired back that calling something an excuse is exactly how people dismiss real suffering. He reminded her that words spoken on a platform like this don't just disappear. They sink in, they linger, and they shape how people see themselves. Joy pushed again, arguing that personal responsibility mattered, that people needed to stop blaming society and start fixing their own lives. Her voice grew sharper, more defensive, as if volume alone could reclaim authority. Danny shook his head slowly, disbelief written all over his face. He asked her how personal responsibility applied to people who were already doing the work. People in therapy, people on medication, people trying every day just to stay afloat. Were they still not trying hard enough in her eyes? The other hosts sat frozen, eyes darting back and forth like spectators at a match no one wanted to referee. The audience remained eerily quiet, fully aware they were watching something spiral far beyond daytime television norms. Joy claimed Danny was putting words in her mouth, that she never told anyone to stop taking medication or ignore treatment. But Danny didn't let her slip away from her own statements. He reminded her that when you tell someone their illness is just attitude, the implication is loud and clear, whether you say it outright or not. He warned her that people watching at home might hear those words and decide they don't need help, that their suffering isn't valid, that they're simply weak. His voice grew louder, not with anger alone, but with urgency. Joy crossed her arms, clearly rattled now, and said maybe her wording could have been better, but her point still stood. She claimed too many people use mental health as a crutch instead of improving their lives. That word hit like a punch. Danny repeated it back to her slowly, forcing her to hear it again. A crutch, he said, asking whether she truly understood what she had just labelled that way on national television. Joy backtracked immediately, insisting she meant some people, not everyone. Danny pressed harder, demanding names, examples, specifics. If people were faking their struggles, who were they? Who exactly was she accusing? Joy stumbled, saying she was speaking generally, but Danny cut her off sharply. He accused her of hiding behind vague language while spreading stereotypes that had harmed people for generations. The studio felt suffocating as every camera stayed trained on their faces. Danny leaned forward, his voice intense but controlled, and explained that the real problem wasn't sensitivity, it was judgment. He said the real issue was deciding who deserved compassion and who didn't, based on outdated ideas of toughness. Joy tried one last defense, saying some people simply handled adversity better than others. Danny threw his hands up in frustration, translating her words plainly. Some people are stronger, some people are weaker, some people deserve empathy, others don't. That's what he heard. Her face flushed deep red as she accused him of deliberately misinterpreting her words. Danny responded coldly, telling her he didn't need to make her look bad because she was doing that herself with every sentence. One of the hosts weakly suggested a commercial break, desperate to stop the collision. Danny refused, saying this conversation mattered too much to cut away from. He insisted they finish it right there in front of everyone. Joy straightened her shoulders, digging in. She declared she stood by her words, calling the younger generation too sensitive, too entitled, and too eager to play the victim card. That phrase lit another fire. Danny repeated it slowly, his voice breaking with emotion as he described meeting real victims. People who had attempted suicide, people who overdosed, people whose funerals he had attended. He spoke of hospital rooms, of hands held in silence, of lives that couldn't be saved. Several audience members wiped away tears as the weight of his words settled in. Joy muttered that those were extreme cases, quickly pivoting back to everyday whining, and the dismissal was impossible to miss. Danny exploded, shouting that suffering doesn't disappear because someone is famous or wealthy. He asked whether money erases trauma, whether success cures anxiety, whether fame fixes a broken mind. Joy stubbornly argued that money and fame provide resources most people don't have. She demanded to know what excuse actors had when they could afford the best care in the world. Danny laughed bitterly, asking what excuse anyone needs to be human. He reminded her that brain chemistry doesn't check bank accounts. An illness doesn't ask permission before striking. Joy admitted she struggled to feel sympathy watching wealthy actors complain from luxury homes. Danny pointed directly at her and said that attitude was exactly the problem. He accused her of believing pain only counts when it comes with poverty. Joy insisted perspective and gratitude mattered. Danny agreed, but flipped it on her. He painted a vivid picture of smiling red carpets, hiding panic attacks, of interviews masking breakdowns, of mansions filled with isolation and fear. Joy dismissed it as dramatic, but Danny surprised everyone by agreeing that yes, those actors had advantages. Then he added what silenced the room again. They also had people like her telling them their pain wasn't real. The studio went completely still. Even the crew had stopped moving. Joy weakly denied ever saying pain wasn't real, and Danny calmly repeated her exact claims back to her, step by step. She tried to escape with, "Agree to disagree, Mike," but Danny shut that door instantly. He said this wasn't opinion, it was about decency, compassion, and whether society keeps repeating harmful lies. Joy snapped that she was compassionate, but the word rang hollow. Danny challenged her definition of compassion, asking whether what just happened looked anything like it. The tension was unbearable now, every second stretching longer than the last. The hosts signaled desperately off camera, but no one could stop what was unfolding. Joy snapped back, her patience clearly gone now, accusing Danny of being obsessed with protecting feelings instead of facing reality. She claimed strength meant endurance, silence, and pushing through discomfort without making it everyone else's problem. Her voice rose, sharp and defensive, as if louder words could rebuild the authority she was losing. Danny didn't hesitate for even a second. He fired back that suffering in silence isn't strength, it's how people break. He said, pretending everything is fine isn't resilience, it's denial, and shaming people for asking for help isn't toughness, it's cruelty. The words hit hard, and there was no humour left in the room. Joy recoiled, visibly stunned at being challenged so directly on her own show. She demanded to know how dare he speak to her like that, how dare he question her experience after decades in the industry. Danny cut her off immediately, asking how dare she dismiss the pain of people who don't have a microphone or a studio audience to defend themselves. The atmosphere turned electric. The audience leaned forward, holding their breath, while the hosts sat stiff and silent, unsure whether to intervene or simply survive the moment. Danny's voice didn't waver as he accused Joy of confusing bluntness with wisdom and tradition with truth. He told her that generations before didn't handle things better, they just hid their pain until it destroyed them. He reminded her how many careers, lives and families were lost because people were told to toughen up instead of being supported. Every word landed heavier than the last. Joy tried to interrupt again, insisting he was twisting her message, but Danny wasn't finished. He said the real danger wasn't sensitivity, it was ignorance dressed up as confidence. He accused her of using nostalgia as a shield to avoid accountability for what she had just said. Her face tightened as she muttered that she was entitled to her opinion. Danny agreed instantly, then added that opinions don't exist in a vacuum. He said when someone with her reach speaks carelessly, those words ripple outward, landing on people already struggling to stay afloat. The audience murmured quietly in agreement, and Joy noticed. Her posture stiffened, her arms folded tightly, and the frustration was now impossible to hide. She accused Danny of grandstanding and turning the segment into a personal lecture. Danny stepped closer to the table, his voice firm but controlled. He said this wasn't personal, it was necessary. He said if even one person watching felt seen or protected because he spoke up, then every uncomfortable second was worth it. Joy scoffed, saying he was being dramatic again. That was when Danny delivered the line that froze the room completely. He said the only thing more dangerous than mental illness is convincing people they should be ashamed of it. The silence that followed was deafening. No laughter, no applause, no gasps, just stillness. Even Joy looked momentarily unsure of what to say next. Danny continued, saying, shame is what keeps people quiet, what keeps them isolated, what convinces them they are broken beyond repair. He told her that shame doesn't build character, it destroys it. Joy finally sat back, clearly overwhelmed, and muttered that the conversation had gone too far. Danny replied calmly that it only went too far because the truth finally caught up. He turned away from her and looked directly into the camera, his voice shifting from confrontation to conviction. He spoke to viewers who felt unseen, unheard, or judged, telling them their pain wasn't imaginary, their struggles weren't weaknesses, and their lives mattered more than anyone's outdated opinions. The audience broke into scattered applause, hesitant at first, then growing louder as the weight of the moment settled in. Joy stared ahead, lips pressed tight, her earlier confidence completely gone. Danny straightened his jacket, took one final breath, and said he hoped this conversation made people uncomfortable, because discomfort is where change starts. He said silence protects stigma, not strength. Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked off the set. The sound of his footsteps echoed louder than any studio applause ever could. The cameras kept rolling, capturing Joy sitting motionless, staring at the empty chair across from her. The hosts exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. The audience didn't cheer, didn't clap again, didn't shout. They just sat there, processing what they had witnessed. This wasn't a typical daytime TV argument. It wasn't a playful debate or a viral soundbite. It was a public collision between two worldviews, and only one of them walked away standing. By the time the show cut to break, social media was already exploding. Clips spread faster than anyone could control, with viewers split sharply down the middle. Some praised Danny for saying what needed to be said, calling it long overdue. Others accused him of crossing a line, of humiliating a host on her own stage. Joy didn't issue an apology that day. She didn't clarify her comments or walk anything back. The silence that followed spoke louder than any statement could. And that's where the real controversy began, not in what Danny said, but in what Joy didn't. Because when a platform chooses silence after words that powerful, the question isn't who won the argument anymore. The question is whether anyone learned anything at all.